What's up, everyone? Welcome to Roto Grinders MLB Crunch Time. I'm your host, TJ Zwarich, joined, as always, almost always on the weekend by my guy, Tim, Tasteful Tides. How you doing, Tim?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Great to see you, TJ. Another Saturday, another, really great day for baseball. So I'm pretty excited to break this down. And we got a special guest appearance with Dave Potts on a Saturday. So this is awesome.
Very special joining us for the weekend show. Brett Devine had a late scratch. And so coming in clutch, subbing in, we have Dave Potts. Cheese is good. How you doing, Dave?
Doing all right. Still, you guys are just making me feel bad already with the posting with your fancy little blue wrench in YouTube chat. I can't even figure how to get on there at all, much less with a special blue wrench next to my name. One day, guys. One day.
One day we'll get there. You gotta fire Devin a message while you're writing the $1 Million Musings during the weekday, and he'll help you get that all set up. But in the meantime, we got a slate to break down here for Saturday. It's daytime. We're just mainly going to cover the DraftKings one, but if you have FanDuel questions, they spread out multiple slates throughout the day, so still feel free to get your questions in. I will look at the Roto Grinders live stream Discord first, followed by the YouTube chat. Make sure you're smashing that like button if you're watching us on YouTube. As soon as we get to, let's say, 40 likes, I got Spidey Bomb number 1, and at 50 likes, I got Spidey Bomb number 2 for the people. Before we get started, there's never been a better time to sign up for Roto Grinders Premium with NBA, PGA, NHL, MMA, and MLB. And we've got an option for whatever level you're looking for. Get yourself a 6-month subscription at an exclusive price of $469.99. That's a savings of $250. Instead of buying 6 individual months of combo premium, you can also get your first month of RG Premium for $40 off for a limited time. Those that want to test run before can dip their toes in the water with our 3-day pass at $19.99. Check the link in our description for more information. Cheese, do you want to? I typically go to you for like the slate breakdown, but you were the late scratch, so I'll give you the option. You want to break it down for us? You want to pass it off to Tim?
Oh, I want to hear what Tim has to say for sure. You start us off. Break it down. Give me everything I need to know in 2 minutes. Everything.
All right. So, there's not a lot of high-end pitching today. We're definitely going to be living, I would say, in the mid-range in terms of pitchers. It's kind of a jumbled mess, in my opinion, in terms of who we're going to go with in tournaments. I think cash is pretty simple, but I'm definitely going to let ownership kind of like guide me when it comes to some of this mid-range stuff on DraftKings. We should talk about guys like Zach Gallen. He's like the one and only pay-up option that I would consider in both tournaments or cash. Personally, I am playing cash games today. I am not going to be pitching Zach Gallen, but there certainly is a case to be made that you could be playing Zach Gallen. And then the super chalky pitcher is going to be Bailey Ober, who I will be pitching in cash games, but he is going to be extremely popular. And I think that there are several pivots that you can make in GPPs. Like, he is by no means a must play in tournaments, and we can break some of those guys down, like that we can go over some of those pivots, because there are plenty of guys that are like in the, mid 7s, low 8s that are very comparable to Ober, and they're going to be coming in at fraction of the ownership. So Ober is a little bit terrifying of chalk, I think, in tournaments, but in cash, he's definitely going to be my first pitcher in. And then bats, we've got 2 really clear high-end stacks, Houston and the Dodgers, and they're very, very, very easy to get to because we really don't have super high-end pitching. So they're going to be extremely popular today. But there are pivots that we can get to, that we can talk about, and different ways to construct our lineups, I think, that are very, very interesting. But really, it's going to be, the chalk construction is going to be 2 balanced mid-range pitchers and then Houston and or the Dodgers. That's going to be your chalk build today. But we can go over other ways to construct our lineups and other pitchers that we can attack.
Sticking with pitching here, Tim, you mentioned you're playing Ober and Cash. And you're not playing Gallen. So who is the person you're pairing with Bailey Ober today in cash games?
Likely it's going to be Cutter Crawford. I think that he gets a fairly reasonable matchup. I think that his skill set is fine. I think there's quite a few strikeouts in that Pirates lineup. I think the Pirates are a relatively soft matchup, and he's only 8K. And if you look at projections across the industry, like he's barely below guys like Zach Gallen and guys like Zach Eflin, at a fraction of the cost. So I'm going to be going with Cutter Crawford. And then I have, not in cash, but in single entry or large field GPPs, I have quite a bit of interest in Miles Mikolas at 5,900. I know he's not a very talented pitcher, but I think at 5,900, he really doesn't have to be. He doesn't have to give us a huge ceiling, and it lets us easily pay up for some of those high-end bats that we talked about. But likely my SP2 in cash is going to be Crawford.
Cheese, how about you? How many lineups you running today for this early slate, and who you liking for pitchers in tournaments?
Yeah, I feel pretty similar to Tim. I ended up with about a dozen lineups, early start, and I sleep in on Saturday, so I didn't get to quite my usual, but I still have, 10 to 15 lineups. And I agree, like Ober is very obviously the top play at that salary against Detroit, but it is kind of weird, especially in like smaller field tournaments where he probably gets up to like 50%. I mean, this is not, even when he's really good, he's more real life good than DFS good. So I won't say he's great chalk. I'll say he's fine chalk, because I think the way I'm seeing this is it just feels like one of those most likely. It probably doesn't really matter who your pitchers are. Unless Gallen were to hit some kind of ceiling game. Like it just seems like a bunch of guys giving you your 15 points. Someone will get 23 and someone will get 9. But I don't think the slate is decided at pitcher. And I agree with Tim. I think Cutter Crawford is my favorite other mid-tier guy. I've got like Mitch Keller and Reese Olson, Jesus Luzardo, all very much in the mix, as is Mikolas on the low end. I am playing a lot of Ober just because of that theory that I don't think it really matters who your pitcher is. And he is cheaper than those other guys. But I wouldn't think you were wrong to just say, oh, you're going to full fade Ober. And even if it's only a couple points, like let's say he scores 15 and you get the guys who score 18, it still helps you with lower ownership to get a few extra points.
Cheese, the one that kind of sticks out to me when looking at ownership, like Ober, I get he's the best. He's in the best spot for sure. Reese Olson, it's Minnesota. They strike out a ton. I get why he's picking up some ownership, but Nestor Cortez facing Tampa Bay has been projecting for like 20 plus ownership all morning. I think that's the guy in tournaments I'm looking to just X out completely. How are you feeling about Cortez at that ownership?
I have 0 Cortez. Never really even seriously considered him. I would rather play like an unowned Gavin Stone, like, a 2% owned Gavin Stone, or even Kyle Harrison or something before Cortez. That's how I stand personally.
All right, that makes me feel happy.
How do you feel about Mitch Keller today? Are you getting any Keller in your pool?
Yes. I have always had a Mitch Keller problem. I've loved the guy for a long time, even before he started being good. And then last year when he had that really strong stretch, I think he's a good pitcher, and I don't think Boston is a good offense.
Right.
And so he and Cutter Crawford are my primary SP2s.
Yep.
I'm either getting up to Gallen with one of them instead of Ober, or pairing Ober with one of those two. Those are definitely my 2 top mid-tier pitchers.
That is how I'm feeling as well. And I'm also doing the full fade of Nestor Cortez. So Seems like we are mostly on the same page today. I also like very low owned Zach Eflin in tournaments, just a large field tournament play, but I like getting to a little bit of him against the Yankees as well. Let's talk about stacks. Cheese, sticking it with you. Obviously, we have Houston and the Dodgers as kind of a tier of their own today. How big of a gap is there between them and any other teams? And then who are the other teams you'd want to get to in tournaments?
Yeah, just note that we're still waiting on those two lineups. They'll probably roll in during the show. There's no setup of their lineup that would make them not chalk. Just, Alvarez, Tucker, Ohtani in particular. Like, I think those three guys are kind of like through the roof ownership. And I think the way I want to play it is to be over the field just on those individual plays and just say that's just fantastic chalk. But full stack somewhere else just to get a little different. And it's a I don't know, it's a big gap, but it's not huge because they're not like the worst pitchers in the world. It seems like Trevor Williams is the worst pitcher in the world, but he's really not. He's still kind of weirdly okay in real life in his own special little way, especially with a team with a bunch of righties. And Jose, however you say that, he's been good. Like, I don't think it's totally real, and the Dodgers can obviously beat anybody, but these are not like worst pitcher in the world kind of spots. So my favorite pivots are going to be the Cubs, even though Luzardo's good. I just think the Cubs are great, and it's kind of a weird lineup. So I ended up doing more mini stacking with either Wisdom or Morel with Swanson and Cooper. I like both St. Louis and Milwaukee. I'm with Tim that like you absolutely can play Mikolas as a cheap pitcher, but you should always play some bats against him if you're doing multi-entry. Like when he gets BABIP, it goes really bad in a hurry. And then Arizona is the other team. Not because of what they did last night after I was fast asleep. I woke up to some weird box score in that game. But Harrison doesn't look quite as good yet as he did last year. And it's just a very good baseball team. So like, I think as a full stack, like a full 5-man stack, I think Arizona's my favorite. But as far as mini stacking, which I'm doing a little more of, Cubs, Brewers, Cardinals.
Cubs are my highest owned mini stack as well. I didn't get to them at all as a 5-man, but as a mini stack, they are my highest owned 2- and 3-man stacks today. Tim, who you like in terms of stacks and tournaments? You're a single entry guy. Who you prioritizing?
Yeah, so if I'm looking to get away from Houston or the Dodgers, the Cubs are my favorite contrarian stack on the board. I ran 150 lineups in SimLabs before the show. Obviously I'm getting to a lot of Houston. I'm getting to a lot of Dodgers. Getting to a lot more Mets than I was anticipating. So the Mets are rating out really, really well in SimLabs. But the Cubs, just from my own personal opinion, I think are my favorite non-Dodger, non-Astro stack. Just because, I know Luzardo is really a strong pitcher, but I think this Cubs lineup is not getting quite the respect it deserves. So I think the Cubs are my favorite contrarian stack, I guess I'd call it, if you wanted to get away from Houston and LA.
2 likes away from Spidey Bomb number 1 and 12 from Spidey Bomb number 2. So smash that like button. I'd like to unleash both of them right now before we start going position by position here. So let's get these likes up for the first one, since we are talking about the Cubs right now anyways. It is a member of the Cubs, Christopher Morel, plus 400 today. Spidey Bomb number 1. And I trust everybody. I trust you that we got 250 people watching on YouTube. Well more than that across the sites, over 500. Let's smash these like buttons. I know you're getting it over 50 for us. Spidey Bum number 2 today, also at plus 400. Kyle Tucker. So Kyle Tucker and Christopher Morel, the 2 Spidey Bums today. Let's go position by position. Let's start with you, Tim. Who are you playing today at the catcher position?
Catcher is actually relatively strong today. You've got the obvious choices of Yanier Diaz and Will Smith. But then you also have Wilson Contreras. So any of those three options, I would say, are your cash game guys. If I have the salary, it's probably going to be Will Smith. But any of those three, I think, are cash game viable. Then you've got players like Ryan Jeffers or Ivan Herrera, who are I guess Jeffers is in that 4K range, so he would be a really, really strong pivot away from those three previous catchers I mentioned. So at 4-2, he's a really, really strong play. And then you've got Ivan Herrera at 3K. He would be my favorite kind of cheap end catcher for cash. And then you've got William Contreras at 5K going up against Mikolas. So there's quite a few. Catcher is much stronger, I think, than it usually is. So you definitely have options. But if I got one choice for cash and I have the money, it's Will Smith.
Cheese, I got a feeling today, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I got a feeling that your favorite cheap punt catcher is Gary Sanchez.
Yeah, you know it. Absolutely. And really, this is a low strikeout pitcher like Mikolas is exactly what Gary Sanchez needs. Both Brewers catchers are my favorite plays. And they're exactly the kind of plays that I would play even in a Mikolas lineup, especially with Contreras. It's kind of the whole reason you play Contreras is to spend up to be different over Smith and Diaz. But yeah, Gary Sanchez is my favorite cheap play. All the other cheap sort of throw them in your stack guys are fine, but I just don't like any of them enough to play on their own other than Sanchez. So mostly living in that kind of obvious Smith, Diaz, Contreras range.
Sticking with you, Cheese, take me over to first.
I slightly prefer Ohtani at first to the outfield because the outfield is much more loaded. And Ohtani, Alvarez, Tucker, I think are just the three very obvious top plays on the slate. There are a lot of ways you can play them and still be okay if you're different elsewhere. And I certainly like Freeman as well. Pete Alonso and all of the Mets will probably be somewhat overlooked. And I also really like Christian Walker on that high end. The cheap stuff, assuming John Singleton is in the lineup for 2,300. I mean, it's kind of like the Gary Sanchez thing. It's just the ideal matchup for a guy with power. He's not some amazing player, but when he hits the ball, it goes a really long way. So give me Singleton, assuming he's in there. If not, and you need the cheap punt, you could play Bobby Dahlbeck, but he's facing a better pitcher. So I would just much rather Singleton if that ends up being an option. That's really it that's staying out. I mean, there's plenty of guys, but essentially Ohtani, Freeman, maybe Alonso or Walker or one of these cheap power guys.
Tim, how about you?
Yeah, Ohtani is definitely the priority in cash games. I do agree with Cheese. I would play him at first base. If I can't get up to Ohtani, I'm going to go all the way down to Singleton, just because he's 2,300. However, I think you're building your cash lineup wrong if you are not playing Ohtani at first. But I do like Singleton, certainly as a tournament play. I think Freeman is not going to get nearly as much ownership as Ohtani. So I think Freddie Freeman is a really good pivot. Like if you wanted to make a Dodger stack in a large field GPP without Ohtani and you throw Freeman in there, your aggregate ownership is going to fall quite a bit. So I think he's a really strong tournament play. I think I talked about how the Mets were simming quite well. So Pete Alonso as a one-off, I think is fine. But really, for me, it's going to be Ohtani. And then I'm just going to move on after that and go right over to second base. I think
before you move on, could we try to go with just make simmering a thing? If saying simming well, just like Alonso is really simmering today. I feel like that's the way we should go from here on.
Yes. All right, I'll try to make that work.
You don't need to, but that's what I'm going to do.
So one other thing I wanted to throw in quick before we transition from first is that I think my favorite single entry style thing to do in tournaments would be to play Freeman and Ohtani together. Use Freeman in that first base one. Use Ohtani in the outfield. I agree. Definitely more optimal in the first base position because of how strong the outfield is, but playing them both together, I think, is a way to get nice and different in tournaments. Second base, Tim, sorry.
Yeah, so Altuve is simmering really well today. So Jose Altuve is probably going to be my cash game second baseman. I would like, obviously Mookie is like the top play, but I mean, we should have enough money to play Ohtani and Betts and a couple other Dodgers, but we also, we'll talk about the other expensive Astros. So we have to make concessions somewhere. Probably I'm going to be playing Altuve over Betts and cash, but that's kind of terrifying. So if you have the money for Betts, by all means play him. So it's really those two at the high end. We've got a min price, Wenzel Perez. He's against Ober, but I think in cash that's okay. If you absolutely have to have the punt, then I think that's fine. I think that if Gavin Lux cracks the lineup, which I'm assuming he should be batting at the bottom of the lineup. I think he's an interesting contrarian play as part of a Dodgers stack. Nico Horner batting leadoff, I think, is a really, really strong GPP play. And I think I'll kick it over to Cheese.
We got some good cheap options here today to go along with our Mookie Betts' and Jose Altuve's. Cheese, what are you doing in second?
Yeah, I don't really think Betts is going to be chalky because I think people are going to play the lefties first. People are going to play Mookie Betts, but that salary and probably the preference to play Ohtani over him makes him. I don't think you need to worry about ownership with him, at least. But I think Ketel Marte is the guy that just gets forgotten in between Betts and Altuve. So he's my favorite spend up to be different. The cheap stuff is all just kind of okay. But I think this is the spot I might just play a Tiger with either Wenzel Perez or Colt Keith. And I also kind of like Louis Garcia, 2,900 against Blanco. So assuming I can't get up over 5K to those three Betts, Marte, Altuve, my lean is just to go all the way down under 3K. Certainly fine with Lux in the Dodger stacks, but Garcia or one of the Tigers are my go-tos there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I like Garcia, and my highest owned players today actually go Ohtani, Alvarez, Tucker, Wenzel Perez, number 4 in terms of my highest owned bats. Take us over to third, Cheese.
Yeah, so Max Muncy and the two Cubs are probably the chalk. We're showing Bregman as chalk, but I kind of think it's going to be Muncy over Bregman, and then with two Cubs in there, Patrick Wisdom being cheap and Morel a little cheaper than Muncy. I don't really think Bregman is chalk. That's enough guys to kind of split it up. I do lean towards Muncy as a one-off. As much as I like the Cubs, and I do, Luzardo is still a good pitcher, so I'm not like going out of my way to make sure I pick on him. But still, 3,200 for Wisdom makes me not really care about the other cheap stuff outside of stacks. Like Oliver Dunn is kind of only in stacks for me. Dahlbeck is still there, but against Keller, he's only if wildly necessary. So other than Wisdom, I'm just spending up for one of those guys.
Tim, how about you?
Yeah, third base is kind of a weaker position compared to the positions that we've already talked about. I agree with Cheese. At the very least, I think Muncy's ownership should go up. I don't know if he's going to be higher than Bregman, but I think he's showing too low of ownership currently. I think he'll be much higher owned than what we currently have him at. I think Muncy is the top overall third baseman. I love the Dodgers today. The Cubs have 3 third basemen on their roster.
I'm not willing to count Nick Madrigal as insane how many third basemen the Cubs have, but go ahead.
Okay. So, but yeah, I love the Morale call. I think that's a really good call. I think Dubon at 2,700 as part of like a wraparound stack for the Astros, I think is a great play. Bregman's fine. I don't think that if you want to play him in cash games, that's fine. I don't know if I want to play him if he's really going to be the chalkiest third baseman. So I would probably either go down to Dubon or play Max Muncy.
You want to know something fun? I just looked it up because I was curious. Nick Madrigal has played 250 major league games, over 800 at bats, 4 home runs. It's not bad. It's not bad power if you can get it.
I wasn't recommending
I'm just
anyone
saying,
to play him. Yeah,
it's wild when you really look at his numbers. Like, nobody has ever loved hitting the ball lightly on the ground more than this guy. And he does it a lot. He never strikes out. Good for him.
One last guy at third I want to mention, Eugenio Suarez. I like him quite a bit for tournaments as part of a stack or a one-off. Shortstop, Tim.
Yeah, so Jeremy Pena is definitely the cash game guy. Certainly at 3,600. Should be batting somewhere like in the 5 or 6 hole. So Pena is too cheap, and he's definitely going to be your cash game option. I love CJ Abrams. I think that he is going to be a player that's going to be over 5K every single day very soon, like probably like in the next month. So I think 4,600 for him is too cheap, and I don't think he's going to be played. And he is by far my favorite like tournaments shortstop. So I may like add him into my single entry team. I usually make like a couple 2v2s from my cash game team to my single entry team. This might be one of them to play Abrams over Pena in single entry. So Abrams for me, Pena in cash, and then of course you could do the punt thing with Perez at the min if you absolutely have to, and of course there's Mookie there at 6,700. Probably, if you're going to play him, I mean, it's a good spot.
Geez, we've been joking lately about how shortstop's the new best hitting position in baseball. Outside of Betts and Abrams, it's actually kind of weaker today.
Yeah, because we don't have Witt and Gunnar Henderson. But just to kind of back up what Tim said, we were talking on last night's show about how amazing shortstop is because of Witt and Gunnar and Betts. But Abrams is the fourth, like, up and coming absolute superstar in that group. And yeah, forget 5K, he'll probably be 6K before long, honestly. So yeah, absolutely love him. The rest of the guys are fine-ish. Certainly, I agree. Like Pena and cash at 3,600 is probably the play, but I think Adames is my favorite tournament play after Abrams. And then that, like the Lindor, Swanson, Volpe, O'Neill, Cruz type group. It's like, sure, whatever. But I just like Abrams enough more than them that I'm going that way.
Outfield, Chiefs.
You know who you should play? Sneaky Ohtani Alvarez Tucker. Shh, don't tell everyone. So those guys are so great, and the matchups are so great that, like, we might get kind of semi-sneaky Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, because they're facing a better pitcher, and like they're more expensive than the Astros. I do really love Judge, because the good thing about Zach Eflin being kind of a good pitcher is, like, even though he should be, I doubt that he is scared of Aaron Judge. Like, he'll try to get him out and throw strikes, and that's never a great idea. So I really do like the Judge pivot, just because those three very obvious guys are so obvious. Kind of the same thing with Jazz Chisholm. Lourdes Gurriel I like a lot. Randy Arozarena. There's a lot of ways to pivot at the high end off of those three superstars. And in most lineups, I wonder if I have a single lineup without one of those three. I hope I have one. It's just so hard not to play them because you can afford them. There is cheap stuff that's fine, but the expensive stuff is so good and easy to get that that's really what I want to do. Like I have some Jesse Winker. You can play some cheap Dodgers after we see the lineup. You can play a Michael Ciani for $2,000 just to make everything work. Jesus Sanchez is fine to me, like 2,900. The Twins, I think, are viable as cheap fill-ins. Trevor Larnach, Austin Martin. I don't love them, but if you're not playing 3 expensive outfielders, for the most part, I'm just looking for a super cheap guy to get me all the other expensive stuff.
5 minutes to walk. We still have no Houston lineup and no Dodger lineup. Tim, quickly take us through who you like at the outfield, then we'll save a couple minutes for QQs.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick, I pretty much agree with what Cheese just said. I think this is positions where you should be spending up on. This is why we're not pitching Eflin. This is why we're not pitching Gallen, because we want to prioritize our salary cap in this very, very loaded outfield position. So I don't think we should be punting in the outfield. If anything, try to find punts maybe in the middle infield spots of your lineup.
All right, let's start taking some questions here. I will, of course, first go to the Roto Grinders live stream Discord. Then I will be checking out the YouTube chat. If you're watching us on YouTube, smash that like button as well. Cheese, DK, GPP, single entry, Soto and Cutter Crawford, or Ohtani and Mitch Keller?
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was just talking about in that outfield. Like any side of that question that has Ohtani is the better answer. But in a single entry, I mean, we might be looking at 40% Ohtani versus 5% Soto, which is silly. So Soto, Cutter, Crawford.
We got a lot of questions asking for some dongs from both of you. So, Cheese, give us a couple home run plays and then give us some taters, Tim.
Does Ohtani, Alvarez, Tucker count? Is that sneaky enough? So I'll take Alvarez out of that guy, and I'll take Aaron Judge at just silly high end. Something I don't know. I just want to say all the obvious names. Let me try to find something that's not as obvious. Obviously, my cheap guy. I've said the word obvious a lot. Gary Sanchez will be my cheap guy for the homer. And in the mid tier, you know what we'll do? We'll do one of my favorite players that we haven't even mentioned yet, Kerry Carpenter.
I like it. So on that note, somebody's asking, can you stack against Bailey Ober today?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Tim, what do you think about Paul Goldschmidt in a tournament?
I don't love it. I think there are better plays. So I don't love it.
Geez, a lot of people asking about Assad. Somebody even went as far as to say as that is their favorite pitcher today. You playing any Assad?
Yeah, like he's just barely behind Cutter Crawford and Keller in that mid-tier price range. I like those two better, but yeah, if Assad is your favorite pitcher, I have no issue with that.
Will Smith is not in the Dodgers lineup.
No Will Smith today. What do you think of some Cooper revenge? You like Garrett Cooper as a one-off, Tim?
I do like the Cubs as a stack, so I have no issue with Cooper.
More questions about Assad. Yes, he is viable as a SP2. Geez, how do you feel about playing Assad and Butto together?
I personally can't do it, and I wouldn't say I really recommend it, but do what you got to do.
Cheese, what do you think about a Rays stack with a Brewers mini stack?
I do think the Rays are quite viable. I prefer them as a mini stack, but yeah, I mean, I would flip it and do a Brewers full with a Tampa mini, or a 4-4. But yeah.
All right, that is it for the QQs. Tim, who do you got for some taters today?
I haven't looked at odds, but I do like Willie Adames quite a bit, and I do like James Outman.
Butthole Jenkins clarifying that he's not in fact pitching on the slate. It's not Butthole, it's Butto. No H for this guy, and we're not pitching him, but we are snacking up against him. That'll do it for the questions. We have reached lock. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Thanks for filling in for Brit. Cheese, thanks for joining me on the weekend as always. Tim, we'll be back for some more Roto Grinders Crunch Time tomorrow with myself, Will, and Taylor. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. And we will see you again here tomorrow. You have been crunched.